You probably haven't heard much about them. The dominions. No fiery thrones, no six-winged spectacle, no booming voices shaking the heavens. In fact, most people skip over them entirely when they talk about angels. They're not flashy, they're not dramatic, they're barely even visible, and yet everything would fall apart without them. Dominions aren't the ones delivering messages in the night. They're not the protectors standing at the edge of battle. They don't fight, they don't sing. They manage, they organize. They make sure every divine command goes exactly where it's supposed to, and that it's followed, without delay and without distortion. You won't find them posing in stained glass or glowing in the background of Christmas stories. They're not the kind of angels you notice. These are the angels that operate between realms, above the messengers and beneath the radiant choirs closest to God. They don't lead armies, they keep them in line. This isn't a story about warriors, rather it's about structure and control, about what happens when heaven needs order and who steps in to deliver it. So who are the dominions? Where did they come from? What role do they play in the divine command chain? And why are they so often left out of the conversation? We're going to dig into it all, from their understated appearance to their hidden responsibilities, from the early writings that first gave them form, to the way they show up, quietly, in some of the most pivotal moments of divine history. But before we dive in, let's get one thing straight. This isn't theology. It's not doctrine. It's mythology. We're treating these stories the same way we would tales of gods, guardians, or ancient spirits, through the lens of lore, symbol, and mystery. What matters here isn't belief. It's the story. So if you're ready, let's begin, not with fire, but with the ones who keep it from spreading. This is the story of the dominions, the angels who keep the universe in order. If you go digging through the old text looking for grand origin stories about the dominions, dramatic tales of rebellion, punishment, or radiant ascension, you'll come up a little short. That's not because their story isn't important. It's because their role has always been more about action than announcement. While some angelic orders dazzle with light or thunder with judgment, the dominions have always existed in the space between decision and execution. They're not known for where they came from. They're known for what they keep running. Their name gives it away. Dominions, from the Latin dominium, implies rule, governance, and control. But this isn't the iron grip of a tyrant. It's administrative. Think of them as the governors of divine law, appointed to keep the systems running when the higher spheres are busy with the bigger picture. They don't make the rules. They make sure the ones who do aren't ignored. To understand their place, it helps to look at the broader angelic structure, a kind of divine chain of command. Traditional Christian angelology divides angels into 9 choirs, grouped into 3 tiers, often called spheres. Each sphere handles a different level of responsibility, from direct service to God, to managing the flow of divine will, to influencing the material world below. We've already covered the first sphere, which holds the angels closest to God: seraphim, cherubim, and thrones. These beings deal directly with the divine. The third sphere contains the angels most familiar to human experience: principalities, archangels, and the general class simply called angels, which we'll cover in the future. These are the messengers, guardians, and guides. They interact with the world directly, often in ways we recognize, through visions, dreams, or divine intervention. But the second sphere, where the dominions reside, includes dominions, virtues, and powers. This is the tier of administration. These angels don't bask in the divine radiance like the seraphim, and nor do they walk among mortals like the archangels. Instead, they process, delegate, and govern. They're the bridge, ensuring that what begins in the highest realms is delivered clearly, correctly, and with structure. Dominions sit right in the middle, not the most radiant, not the most visible, but absolutely essential. They first appear explicitly in the writings of early Christian thinkers like Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, whose work on the celestial hierarchy helped shape the entire structure of angelology for centuries. He emphasized that the dominions had a specific job: to oversee the lower choirs, making sure they carried out God's will properly, not through punishment, but through direction. That role has kept them mostly out of the spotlight. The Bible doesn't name them directly, but their influence is hinted at in verses that reference thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers. You'll find these phrases scattered throughout Paul's letters, especially in Colossians 1:16 and Ephesians 1:21, where he references the layered structure of heaven. These weren't just poetic flourishes. They were clues pointing to a divine system most people never got to see. Unlike the thrones or cherubim, the dominions don't show up in visions or detailed prophetic accounts. Their presence is felt in the way things stay in place, in the silence between decisions, in the fact that divine will reaches the world at all, unwarped and uncompromised. Some traditions believe the dominions were among the first to step into a managerial role after the rebellion of Lucifer. If that's true, it might explain their reputation for steadiness. They neither rise or fall, they just keep going because someone has to. And in a universe ruled by law as much as by love, that kind of consistency is invaluable. The dominions don't wear their power like armor. You won't see them erupt in light, brandish flaming swords, or surround themselves with wheels or wings covered in eyes. Their presence isn't meant to overwhelm, it's meant to reassure. If you were to see one, you probably wouldn't collapse in fear or fall to your knees in awe. You'd go quiet, like walking into a room where everything is in perfect order, nothing out of place, nothing left to chance. They're often described as robed in white or shining garments, but not extravagantly. Their symbols are subtle, but consistent. A scepter, representing authority. An orb or seal, representing responsibility. Sometimes a chain of light across their chest, or a star-shaped sigil at their brow. They carry the look of function wrapped in dignity. Wings are typically present, but even those tend to be understated compared to higher angels. While a seraph's wings blaze with divine fire, the wings of a dominion are more often depicted as wide, symmetrical, and smooth, less like a storm and more like a shield. They're not designed to dazzle. They're designed to cover ground, to move when necessary, and stay when not. Their faces are almost always serene, not cold, just calm, focused. You don't get the sense that they're thinking about you in the way a human would, with curiosity or judgment. You get the sense that they already know what's needed, and they're quietly making sure it happens. Their gaze isn't piercing or mystical. It's steady, and somehow that's even more unnerving. Some depictions include a scroll or book, records of divine instruction. Others show them with glowing halos shaped like rings of light with sharp edges, sometimes intersected by lines like a compass. Not symbolic in the poetic sense, but more like a reminder that they're aligned with something above them, and their role is to reflect that alignment down. In modern interpretations, especially among those who approach angelology with a mystical or artistic eye, dominions are sometimes imagined with starlight embedded in their skin, not to make them beautiful, but to reflect the idea that they operate between realms, visible enough to appear, distant enough to remain untouchable. They don't appear in chaos. They appear in the middle of it to restore order, not with a shout, but with a presence that says, "This ends now." They're not terrifying, they're not even grand, but the moment you see one, you know something important is happening. And more importantly, you know it's already been decided. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. Dominions are the managers of angels. If heaven were an institution, structured, layered, endlessly vast, They would be its middle command, not the highest in rank, and not the ones who deal directly with humanity, but the ones who keep everything running between those two worlds, quietly, precisely, without a need for recognition. They don't make decisions, nor do they execute them directly. But once a divine command is spoken, it's the dominions who take responsibility for the implementation. They don't interpret or debate, they align. Orders move through them, unfiltered, and are delivered to the virtues, the powers, and, when needed, the archangels. This relay ensures that divine intent becomes divine action without distortion. Without that structure, even holy will would scatter. In behavior, dominions are reserved. Their silence isn't apathy, it's intention. Appearances are rare and never without purpose. Their demeanor is measured, and when they arrive, it signals that something already in motion is being corrected or enforced. They don't linger. They don't explain. They arrive when needed and vanish once alignment is restored. They carry no weapons. Instead, they wield tools of governance, clarity, correction, instruction. Their voice is calm, firm, and final. No dramatics, just resolution. They are not creators like the thrones, nor do they guard mysteries like the cherubim, but they possess one unique authority. They can direct other angels. If a power deviates from its role, or if a virtue falters in its influence, it's the dominions who step in to recalibrate. Their influence ensures the entire angelic framework stays intact, not through force, but through order. This function has earned them comparisons to the nervous system of the divine body. They don't command the will, and they don't perform the actions, but they make sure every signal travels from the mind to the limbs, pure and uninterrupted. One of the earliest and most crucial moments in their history, according to some traditions, was during the rebellion of Lucifer. When a third of the angelic host questioned the divine order and chaos threatened heaven's structure, it wasn't just Michael and the warrior angels who took action. The dominions responded in their own way, not by drawing swords but by reasserting control over the fractured command structure. Their role wasn't to punish, it was to stabilize, to prevent the collapse of faith among the undecided. They reminded those caught in between where authority truly came from, and when the war was over, they were the ones who quietly repaired the damage, relinking what had been broken. This moment, often overshadowed by the more dramatic clashes, speaks volumes about their role. When heaven wavers, the dominions don't escalate, they anchor, and in doing so, they ensure the divine system continues to function. Even today, mystical traditions say that when confusion spreads among the lower choirs, when angels hesitate or seem divided, it's often a sign that the presence of a dominion is missing, or that the chain of command has been disrupted. Their arrival rarely stuns, but their absence is felt immediately. It's not glory that defines them, it's necessity. And maybe that's their greatest strength. They get everything moving, by never getting in the way. If there's one book in the Bible that's packed with imagery, tension, and spiritual drama, it's Revelation. From beasts and plagues to trumpets and seals, it's a whirlwind of symbolism and divine reckoning. Angels take center stage throughout it, carrying messages, pouring out judgment, rallying the forces of heaven. But here's the thing, the dominions are never called out by name. And that's not surprising. Revelation isn't a catalog of angelic ranks. It's a vision, a powerful, chaotic, terrifying glimpse into what the end might look like. It gives us action, emotion, conflict, but it doesn't always slow down to explain who's making the gears turn behind the scenes. That's where the dominions come in. They're not the ones blowing trumpets or leading armies. They're not the ones binding the dragon or casting down stars. But their fingerprints are everywhere. Every time a judgment unfolds with perfect timing, every time one angel steps aside for another, every time the great machinery of heaven seems to move without friction, it echoes the kind of order the dominions are known for. Some theologians and mystics suggest that the dominions are the ones keeping Revelation from collapsing into chaos, not by controlling the outcome, but by managing the process. They're not there to stop the end. They're there to make sure it unfolds as it should, without shortcuts, without confusion, without interference from forces that might want to rush the plan or twist it out of fear. You can see traces of this in how the sequences are laid out: the seals, then the trumpets, then the bowls. It's relentless, but it's structured. Each act builds on the last. Each wave of judgment is layered with a kind of divine precision. And while the text credits the messengers and the visions, someone, or something, keeps the whole thing from tearing itself apart. In this view, the dominions act as the unseen conductors of the apocalypse, not by choosing who lives or dies, but by ensuring the rhythm stays intact. If another angel faltered or broke rank, the dominions would be the ones who reset the order. If a spiritual law was about to be violated, they'd be the quiet authority correcting the course, not for glory, but for the integrity of the design. Of course, none of this is spelled out in Revelation. It doesn't need to be. That's the nature of the dominions. They don't demand recognition. They just do what has to be done, even if no one notices. Especially if no one notices. Because when the end of the world comes, someone has to make sure it doesn't happen out of order. For all their distance from the human world, the dominions are far from irrelevant to it. In fact, some traditions believe that much of what they oversee touches directly on human experience, especially in areas we often overlook: structure, purpose, and the chain of influence that governs our choices. Dominions aren't thought to interfere with daily life the way guardian angels or archangels might. They don't whisper in dreams or swoop in during moments of crisis. But their influence shows up in systems, those big, often invisible frameworks that shape how people lead, follow, and respond to the world around them. Some theologians say that the dominions guide how power flows, not just in heaven, but on earth. Not in the sense of deciding who wins elections or who gets promoted, but in maintaining the balance of influence itself. When things fall apart, when leadership becomes tyranny, or when chaos spreads unchecked, it's often interpreted as a sign that the channels once governed by the dominions have been neglected or corrupted. It's why they've sometimes been called the watchers of authority, not watchers in the passive sense, but stewards. They're said to inspire just leadership, to encourage those in positions of power to act with wisdom and restraint, and to nudge corrupt systems toward correction, even if that correction takes generations to unfold. This connection to leadership makes them especially relevant during times of upheaval. In medieval and Renaissance Christian thought, monarchs were believed to be appointed by God, a notion tied in part to the idea that dominions helped channel divine authority into earthly governance. When a ruler was just, their rule was seen as blessed. When they were cruel or unjust, it was said the dominions might withdraw their quiet support, leaving the leader exposed to the consequences of their actions. Of course, in the modern age, that idea feels distant. We don't usually connect bureaucracy, leadership, or law with the movement of angels. But if we pull back far enough, the dominions still fit. They represent the hope that power doesn't have to corrupt, that order can be sacred, that unseen forces might still be working to steer systems, political, spiritual, even personal, back into alignment when they falter. Even at a personal level, some mystics believed the dominions help individuals align with their purpose. Not by forcing fate, but by clearing the clutter that keeps people from seeing what they're meant to do. It's not intervention, it's recalibration. Less about changing your life overnight, more about adjusting your inner compass over time. They don't offer comfort, they offer structure. And in a world that often feels directionless or out of balance, that structure might be the most spiritual thing of all. Now that we've seen what the dominions are, how they function, how they lead without spectacle, it becomes clear why they're so often overlooked. Their presence isn't designed to captivate, it's meant to stabilize. And in a world that's always leaning toward disorder, divine or otherwise, that role is more essential than it seems. Their strength isn't in what they do loudly, it's in what never spirals, because they were already there, 2 steps ahead. Systems don't hold together by accident. Messages don't carry themselves. Even in the heavenly hierarchy, someone has to keep the gears turning. That's the quiet work of the dominions. They remind us that power doesn't have to draw attention to be effective, that order, structure, and responsibility, while rarely celebrated, are what make everything else possible. And maybe that's what makes them resonate, especially now. In a time when chaos often gets center stage, there's something almost radical about the idea of unseen forces holding the line, not for praise, but because it needs to be done. They aren't the heroes of the loudest stories, but they are the reason those stories can happen in the first place. So as we close the book on the dominions, don't expect a blaze of glory or a final burst of divine light. Just know that somewhere beyond the noise and wonder, the dominions continue to serve.